Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Honest Conversations with Esther. My name is Esther, and on this week's episode, I'll be interviewing Perrykent Nkole. He's an author, a speaker, and a human rights activist who engages with women and children on sexual and reproductive health rights across several communities in Southern Africa. Welcome to the show, Perry.
Thank you so much, Esther, and hello to the viewers. It's really good to be here.
Mm-hmm. So as an icebreaker, I have some questions in a bowl just to get both of us really comfortable.
Sure.
So you pick a question, and whatever you pick, that would be the first question you answer.
Right.
So go ahead.
I don't know what to expect from the question, but do I read it out myself?
Yeah, sure.
Favorite author? It has to be from the African Writers series.
Yes.
Because those were the first books that I read, and they had such a huge influence on my life.
Chinua Achebe.
Yes, it has to be him. It has to be him, actually. But some of the books that I read that he wrote were very impactful on me, so it has to be Chinua Achebe, favorite author. Yeah.
Okay. That was an easy one.
Yeah.
Let's see. I hope you pick something more interesting.
All right. If you had all the money in the world, what would you buy? For myself or for people?
Generally, just something, immediately, something. It could be something frivolous, it could be something like humane, like, oh my goodness, he bought that for somebody.
I'd buy an island.
Yeah?
I'd buy an island.
You're such a writer. You're really a writer.
Trying to get as far away from the world as possible. So I'd probably buy an island. But if I did have money and like using it more positively, though, I do have a very soft spot for old people.
Yeah.
I have this dream of setting up what I'm gonna call Perry's Paradise, which is like a resort with hospitals and facilities just for old people to just like spend to enjoy the rest of the remaining years of their lives, and young people could go there and learn stuff, and
Indeed, and I feel like one of the toughest things is to see old people grow up and not have an income.
Yeah.
When they've grown old, somebody's 70, 80 and they still have to work, or some end up on the streets begging, so that can actually be quite sad.
Indeed.
Do you have those?
Okay. Okay. I get the feeling I'm going to answer all the questions. What do you always have on you? I could say a cap, but obviously I'm not wearing one. But these days I think I'm wearing a lot of these
Shambalas and the like.
bracelets.
And I think I've seen the cape that you often wear, the one with your name on it.
I don't wear that one anymore because it's worn out. But I think I have a new version of capes that I wear. The ones that old people wear,
the ones that you pin in the front, the button. Yes, those are back. So, like I think a friend told me that they're called the newspaper boy hats.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and the bow hats, they're really in fashion. They look really classy.
Yeah, I like those these days.
Yeah,
much more.
So anyway, back to you, Perry. So have you been writing anything lately?
Yeah, I mean the last 3 years, I have been working. It's been like 3 years now since I wrote, since I published my last book, and since then I've been drafting something which I'm hoping could be out by March.
Nice.
2023.
This is your third book?
Third, yes.
Wonderful. So how did you find yourself as a writer? A writer's born or writer's made?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think first of all, writers are not born, storytellers are born. So you are born a storyteller, but you learn to be a writer and you grow and learn. The art of putting words on paper and so on. So you can't be born a writer. That's a skill you learn.
So writers are made.
Yes, you can. You become a writer. But I was born a storyteller. I loved stories. Even way before I learned how to effectively write. So I would always sit down and tell stories and all. And then what was interesting about my upbringing was I used to have it easy with the ladies, because when there's like load shedding, no power, so they would be really bored, and I was the guy that would sit around and then I would tell them stories, So they really liked that, and so I knew quite early that I loved stories. I was a storyteller, and
Would you say you're still the smooth guy?
I don't know. I think I've lost my charm.
Yeah.
I think I've lost my charm. Could be part of the reason why I'm single, but but yeah, I think I've never really struggled to having my way around words.
Yes.
it gets to an extent where like women love words, and
Yes.
sometimes you even know what to say to make her like fall and stuff, So yeah, it's been like that. I don't think I've lost my touch entirely, but it's something like that. I used to have much more
control over it.
Yes.
So you brought up an interesting point about your childhood and how girls would sit around you on the fire, and you're the smooth guy just telling them the lines and my cup of tea and whatnot. So tell me about your childhood. Where did you grow up?
So I was born in one of the biggest shanty compounds we have around in Southern Africa, Kanyama compound, and I was born at Kanyama Clinic. I grew up in a compound, sort of, in a ghetto setup, and it was just like, I grew up and then I saw a lot of things that didn't make sense around me. Why were we hungry? Why were we poor? Why didn't we have enough money to eat and all of that stuff? And then, everything was normal until I was exposed to a much better life. But besides the negative aspect, I think it was a really fun childhood, very adventurous. I have a lot of scars on my body that tell a different story.
Do you sort of think that being in that environment sparked your creativity because you had to find ways to escape your reality?
I think that's about the best way to put it. I think because I was born in that environment, it sort of gave me the hunger and desire to long for more, because I knew quite early that life could be better. One verse that kept me going as a child is a verse from the book of Ephesians that says, "Unto him that is able to do exceedingly
and abundantly above."
Yes, all we could ever think, ask, imagine. So in my mind, I was like, there's probably a better life beyond all of this, And because the book I'm writing now is called The Art of Asking Questions, and it says a lot about the level of curiosity I had as a child, and so many questions I had about God, about life, about creation, about everything that was around me, and it put me on a path to seeking, finding out more about God, about purpose. I knew quite early that I needed to know my purpose in life, and so pretty much.
So you mentioned that you grew up in some really tough times.
Yeah.
What are some moments that you look back on childhood and says, when you say, that was really tough, and it really sort of sparked the fire in you to say, I need to get out of here?
Well, we ate once a day, which is like in the evening. During the day, you have to survive. It was some really, really tough years when my parents divorced and I was left. I grew up with my dad, but when they divorced, I was quite young. So I grew up around a lot of poverty, lack, hunger, anger, and all of that stuff. So there was a lot of, I would say, hardship. Even just finishing school was a struggle. I think I was very lucky when I got a chance to go to a much better school. I did my grade 1 to 7, as you know, from Chibole Primary School.
Yes, and that's one of the toughest drug neighborhoods in Zambia. There's drugs and violence. And
so I walked from home to school and back every day to that school. So I would pass through Chibole compound, every day. So after I passed my grade 7 to grade 8, I went to Jacaranda Primary School behind Taj Promo's Hotel. And that was like a different outlook,
It's a different neighborhood.
I saw, but then it was still a struggle because we were still poor in reality. And I was just privileged to have it because I had good results to be at that school. But I still saw, the difference in the life that I lived and the life that my friends lived. They were dropped off, they had more money, they had, packed lunch and all that stuff, and had to walk from Kanyama
home and go back home and eat once a day.
And eat once a day. I mean, it wasn't always like that, but that was the norm for me. So, it was hardship, but through it all, I think if I look back, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yes.
I think it was a gift in disguise. God had packaged my life in such a way that it looked like it was really like a curse. But then eventually I look back and say, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And there's no school I will ever attend that will teach me lessons that will surpass the lessons I learned from my childhood.
Indeed, that's a lot of depth. So you really, going back, you say that you felt that there was better somewhere. What do you think made it possible for you to be an outlier? Because coming back from a community like going to Chiwolia Basic, there's the drugs and the violence around. What made it possible for you to be an outlier or to really believe, to say that there's more out there and really just reach for it?
I think I was also lucky enough to learn to read. And when that happened, I started to read books, The interesting thing was, when I read books from Europe and America, it was very hard for me to relate because I couldn't see the pictures. But when I read African books, I could hear the drum beat. I could see black women dancing under the moonlight.
Yes.
It made a lot of sense. So I think what made me...
And most African writers really do have an obsession for women. But that's a story for another day.
I do as well.
For black women,
yes. So even just the way they would describe the food and all of that stuff. So I read a lot of books from the African Writers series, mostly West African, East African, and I think some Zambian writers as well. So all of that had an influence on me, on the way I saw the world, and the fact that I think one of the biggest blessings that God gave me is the deep desire to learn, curiosity, the desire to learn more and grow and become better. And that gave me the interest to read more and more. And it broadened my horizon, my vocabulary, and my interest in, and I think my perspective on the fact that there's no such thing as absolute truth, there's the objective truth.
Some like to say there's no truth, there's only perception.
Yes, so the way that you see something might be different from the way I see it. So I began to search for, I think at the end of my life, the point would be that I was really just searching for God. In the process, I found myself. You understand? So I think that's what it was. God giving me a desire to long for more, for life beyond what was around me. And I'm still in the process. I don't think I have reached the climax of my existence. So we're still heading there, but I think based on how I see it and my understanding, that's what I think.
And I think a lot about life is really just realizing that, at least in my opinion, there's never really a destination. Even when you think you've arrived, there's just more road at the place where you've arrived. There's more journey for you to travel.
Indeed. And I think what my prayer constantly is that God continues to bless me with the desire to keep growing and learning. And never reach a point where I feel like I have reached and I have arrived.
Truly. Because everything is constantly growing and evolving.
We die when we stop learning.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think it's important to have like a sense of constant growth.
Indeed. So you won a prestigious competition. I remember the first time I actually saw you was not when we met on radio. For those who may not know, Perry is actually the person who called me to radio. Interesting thing, I never went looking for radio. I always say radio came looking for me.
Yeah.
Because I made a phone call to a radio station, and next thing I know, they have my number and they call me and they say, "You sound good, we want to give you a show."
Yeah.
So Perry was that guy.
Yeah.
But before we went on radio, I remember that I saw you on TV. It was the finale. I didn't watch the whole competition, I just watched the finale of the show. It was called Junior President. So tell me about your journey with Junior President.
It was a show on ZNBC that brought together young people. At a time when social media was not the way that it is now, entertainment was solely from like television. So we had more people that were watching TV then than we have now, like local TV. So it was a very creative project that ZNBC creative team came up with, where they said, you know what, we want to show what Zambia's future would look like in terms of the quality of leadership. And so they came up with a show that would bring together kids like below 16, 17 years, who were within that range. Some as young as 14, who were very young. And so said, we want to see how kids would act if they were given the power to be the president of the country. And so I saw the audition date. Something within me very strongly said, go for it. And I remember asking for my dad a 20 kwacha, which was a lot of money by then. So I need to go for this audition, I need a 20 kwacha. That was the fee that we were supposed to pay. And so I went with some friends of mine and said, let's go try it out. So several friends of mine, some of them made it through to the audition, and we competed together. But up until the end, the top three, all of us were friends. So, and people liked it. I think it had a lot of impact, especially for kids in the ghetto. A lot of people that were impacted by that show were people that, within them awakened the desire to do more and to aspire for more, and that just because you come from the ghetto does not mean you should entirely look down on yourself. And I think that's the strongest message that came out of that, because my story was shaped around.
You came from the ghetto, and then this kid who just came with so much confidence on TV.
Yeah.
I remember, confession, the first time I actually saw you, I was like, wow, this kid is cocky. Yes, but you're just that guy who had to be larger than life and just have so much presence, and when you walk into your room and your presence is felt.
Yeah, because if you come from that background, you have no connections. Nobody knows you. Nobody's going to give you a chance. If you don't stand out, you will simply not have the chance. So I think God had prepared me prior to all of that, to that competition, to learn and grow, such that when it was time, it was just a moment of exposure to say, this is what I have prepared, this is what I've placed in this guy, and that's what it really was, but it was really not entirely about me. I think I was really impacted. It was more about the people that were watching and how much they were impacted. I met this one woman who told me that they cried as a family when I won, because it was so sentimental and it made so much sense. And I think it's one of the few reality shows I have seen that has had huge impact, like a Zambian show that has, has had impact. So
Yes. And then what was surprising is that at the end of the show, one of the prizes was a scholarship.
Yeah.
You turned down a scholarship.
I did, because it was a business scholarship, and I wasn't a business guy.
Yes.
I think it was a good scholarship, but I think there was others that deserved. I wasn't the only one that got it. It was other people that got it as well that were in the competition. So I think if I remember correctly, I did turn it down, or I didn't.
And what was the reaction from your family turning down the scholarship?
Most of the decisions I've made in my life, they all look like risks.
Yes.
Why are you doing this? Why don't you do that? Like my parents would have rather have it that I followed the actual path. You go to college, you get a paper, you get a job somewhere, but I've not been the one to follow that path. And now they're looking at me, and it's making a bit of sense now. I say, oh, maybe he knew what he was doing. But
sometimes you just have that inner knowing.
Yes,
to say
that
this is who I am.
Yes.
This is where I ought to be.
Yeah, and I'm glad that I followed my heart. I still try to explain to my parents what I do for a living. It's not easy because it's not in the conventional system of the world. So
I agree, and I think I can totally relate, because in my case, yes, I do have a conventional job. But then here I am doing radio sometimes on the weekend. I'm doing media and camera. I'm here all over the place with my camera for something that I'm not getting paid for. So most people would not understand. But I think my family just got into a point where they think, okay, she loves this thing. We don't have to understand, but we're a family and we're here to support it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so moving forward, you turned down the scholarship. How did that go for you the first few years? Did you ever have a point where you thought you should turn back and should have taken the scholarship?
Well, I can honestly say that the hardest days of my life as a young person trying to transition into adulthood was after that show. When it was done, people had huge expectations that my life was going to change. I was going to get a car and a house, and I would have money and all of that stuff. But it didn't happen. It really didn't happen, because people had that's the perception that people had. But also because there were a lot of promises that were made on TV by so many people saying, we're going to do this for him and all of that stuff. But when it was done, the people that were in charge of the show had made their money, and they forgot about it and stuff. So I realized that my life was not done. I needed to keep going, keep moving.
You hadn't arrived.
Pick myself up and find a path in life and forget all of that. I needed to get out of the zone of saying I won all of that. And I needed to just, head on. And for some people, they felt like the following year, they wanted me to do season 2, sort of, to come back to the show
and compete again.
I didn't feel like I needed to prove anything anymore. I felt that others deserved the opportunity, I guess. But the way in which all of that was handled, burnt some bridges somehow. And I think it happened because some people felt they needed me to be used again in a certain way. And I didn't feel very comfortable, even though I was a child. So, yeah, I think that it happened, and I realized that I was on my own after I turned down to go back and do the show again. There was no more support and all of that stuff, and also I had to pick myself up. I volunteered a lot, and then we met at the time when I was volunteering for the radio, live radio.
Yes, when we were both doing live radio.
Yeah, that's when I was walking I was still staying in Kanyama, from Kanyama to there.
Wow.
Just to be on radio.
And these are things I actually didn't know. So you even walk back to Kanyama.
Yes, definitely.
Walk from Kanyama, walk back to Kanyama.
But before that, when I was still in high school, before that competition, I would walk from Lusaka High School to Radio Christian Voice, to NBC, to Movie TV, just to learn media and gain some confidence. And it is those times that I volunteered that have shaped me to become the person that I am today, and to earn what I earn today, and to do the things that I do, like right now. It's paying off, I can honestly say.
That's wonderful, a story of triumph. So moving forward, you've turned down your scholarship. You're living through the hard times, what I like to call the school of hard knocks. Get what I mean? Because obviously people assume that it's only failure that you have to move on from, but even your successes, as you mentioned, you have to move on from your success and not just arrive. So were there moments that you felt lost, and what was your next move in between? Okay, I've turned down a scholarship, I'm not doing this anymore. Were there moments that you felt lost, and where did you find your sense of direction? Say, this is Perry and this is where he's going.
I think if I'm to describe the outlook of my movement then, I couldn't see beyond my nose, basically. It was all dark, and I think those were like very defining days of my life, because then I had no choice but just to trust in God, because there was nothing else, I had nothing, completely nothing. I like to say that all I had was a pocket full of dreams, and it was up to me to be willing and available to turn all of those dreams into reality. And I couldn't see. There was nothing to see. There was nothing ahead. But like you said, I think what I still had, I had lost so much, I had lost opportunities, but what I still had was the desire to grow and the sense of like a longing that things could be better, and that's what really kept me going. And the fact that I saw my parents suffering, my family suffering, and I knew that God had placed some things in me, so I knew that I could turn that situation around for the better. But I knew that it's going to take a lot, and I had to keep going, and I did just that.
Nice. So how did you get to writing your first book?
Yeah, my first.
Was your first book The Black Balloon?
That was the second.
That was the second.
The first book was an embarrassment.
Put it here. That's how I feel about my first articles. I don't even show them to people. It's like, no.
Yeah. So, but before that, what really shaped my writing quite early. So the Zambia Daily Mail had this section every Sunday called the Young Writers Series. So every Sunday they would publish, they had like a Young Writers Corner. So every Sunday they would get articles written by kids, by children, and then they would publish them there. So every Sunday my article would be there. And I would write about my community, how divorce affects children, because I came from that background, sanitation, how climate change affects children, human rights, and all of that stuff. So I was sharing stories based off my experience. I think when I wrote my first book was God trying to show me that it's possible, you can publish. I mean, obviously you need to publish much more sensible things later.
What is the book called?
It was called Birds of Different Feathers. Look at me forgetting the title of my book.
Why do you think that Africans should write?
I think Africans should write because it's important to keep records of our stories as Africans, but also because I think we come from a history where our grandfathers never used to write.
Indeed.
They would use oral tradition to pass information to the next generation. There's so much information we've lost in the last 100 years as a continent. like medicine, around
Yes.
medicine,
Religion,
spirituality,
yes.
social systems. And I think people back then had a better understanding of, for example, marriage between a black man and a black woman.
Yes.
There was a different level of understanding of how to make it work that's just not there now. And
Indeed, indeed. Yeah. And a lot of the stories that exist, in fact, most of the history that exists that wasn't carried on through oral traditions about black society came from people who were here to take over the land and the minerals.
Yeah.
And then so this person writes the story that we're cannibals, when there's no record of cannibalism in any of the oral traditions of Africans.
Yeah.
So somebody comes over, wants to take over the land. Do you think that this person is actually going to write an honest perspective of who these people are? People that accommodated them, that they turned the gun on them.
So the way that our history has been shaped in a way is to have a defeating story.
Yes.
When I read about African history, there was nothing inspiring besides the few times you read about Shaka.
Yes, but now histories, they came here, found our ancestors eating each other, and they elevated us.
Like we had social systems. I mean, we were not as advanced as some countries, but I think it's also fair to say that civilization started from here in Egypt. Yes. We have infrastructure that dates back so many years, way before civilization in Europe or Americas and the like. In Africa, a lot of intelligent sites here we have. Our ancestors were not primitive in any sense. I think it is the wicked nature of the colonizer who came and saw the potential of this land and what her people would be if we were just left alone and just have our own resources. We were not selfish. We were willing to share, but they wanted to come and just take over everything. They're still running the systems now. I talk about this in my book in much more depth, the level of influence former colonizers still have on the African continent, and the fact that our future is not even in our hands. There's so much that depends on other people, even though we have much more resources, much more potential. I think we should write so that the next generation will know the truth, undiluted truth of our history.
Indeed, I like the saying that until the antelope learns to write, the lion will always be the hero of the story. So it's important to tell African stories for that reason.
Yep.
But let's bring it home. Why do you, Perry, write?
It must be for two reasons. I think it's for two reasons. One, to unburden myself, because I stay up late many nights thinking about very heavy things. When I write them down, it feels like, off my chest.
Like it's just releasing and flowing out.
But also to try, in a sense, to elevate somebody's mind out there that, that has the chance to read any of my articles or books, or have a conversation to just elevate someone's mind, change the shape of their thinking from the way they were seeing things, not cohesively, of course, but in an empowering way to bring new perspectives.
Indeed. Yeah. So the new book you're writing is about asking questions.
Yes, the importance of asking questions, how questions have shaped the world, the fact that there was a time the world believed the earth was flat. It took somebody who asked the questions, but wait. Questions
it was
like
flat would fall off the edge at some point.
So questions like why and all of that. So life questions. It's a very interesting book that best describes the nature of my mind and the nature and the kind of life that I have lived. And I think it best describes the kind of a child I was and the kind of a child that still lives in me now.
Great. So if you could say anything to your younger self or somebody going through a similar tough situation as you did, or the tough situations that you faced growing up, what would you say to them?
Keep going, keep growing. It gets better, it really does. You will never waste time in investing in yourself. When you're investing in yourself, it is never a waste of time. Sometimes you have to take time off from the public and everyone else just to improve yourself. Have a sense of purpose, but also goal-oriented. Know exactly where you want to go and start doing the things that will get you there deliberately. If your goal is to be the president, you start looking like, speaking like, learning like, so that when the opportunity does present itself, you would have prepared yourself. If you look at David in the Bible, when he was facing Goliath, all he did, he was just, what gave him confidence was his CV. He says, look,
Yes.
God was preparing me when he was making me fight lions and bears in the jungle.
Yes.
And now
he didn't even know he was being prepared for something.
Yeah. So he says, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Because me, I'm faced much more, tougher adversaries. So keep growing, improving yourself, and never stop learning. Because the day you stop learning is the day you die. You stop moving forward. People don't die because they've gone to the grave. There's people that died at 25 and they were buried at 75 because they stopped learning. So yeah, we should constantly learn and grow, have a sense of purpose, sense of death, knowing that you're not here forever. Many people like to ignore death.
Yes.
When it comes, it's like, so we need to be conscious of that and live our lives in a much more purposeful way.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Perry. It's been interesting. Thank you for sharing your story with us. And you brought up an interesting aspect of relationships.
Yes.
And I think we should do a series on making Black love work.
Yeah.
And just have honest conversations about it, about a lot of young people and why, for instance, the divorce rates are rising and those kind of conversations around it.
Yeah,
Thank you for your perspectives on empowerment, on women, and also we wish you the best with your new book.
Thank you.
We'll be coming back when he does publish the book and we'll do a review on this channel.
Definitely.
And yeah, see you on the next episode and all the best with everything.
Thank you, Esther, for coming and for the interview. I really had fun.
Great. Please remember to subscribe, and I'm also on Instagram on Honest Conversations with Esther. That's for YouTube, and on Instagram it's Esther Miss Hills, ASTAR_MISSHILLS, Esther Miss Hills. See you on the next episode, and thank you for watching.